This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for what I call another wonderful entertainment podcast. Um, you know, Sometimes we get somebody on who the name is very recognizable, and everybody says, yeah, I know who that is. And today you may not know exactly who he is, but I think before this podcast is over, you're all going to want to know him more intimately, which means buying his book, listening to a new video that is coming out. So we are going to welcome Thomas Mace-Archr-Mills. Now, that's not a New York name, is it, Thomas?
No, it's not, Karen. It's not. And thank you for having me. But I will tell you, I was born in upstate New York, not New York City, 4.5 hours on the train if you go north from Penn Station. So it was always easier to fly in and out of Montreal and just drive the few miles down over the border.
So
Yes.
where in northern New York were you?
Lake George, Bolton Landing on Lake George.
I know the
Yes,
area
so
very well. Yes.
Perfect. Named after King George II. My town, Bolton Landing, is the most beautiful place of real estate on that lake. It's 32 miles of just crystal clear, unspoilt water. And yeah, the town was even built on land grants from the king. So there's a lot of British history there. The French and Indian War took place there. The War of Colonial Aggression, better known as the War of American Independence, was fought all around there. So yes, it's Britain is in my geographical location as well as in my blood. So my mother and her family were all British Northern Irish descent, and actually from the United Kingdom. So not too far-fetched that I do have two parents, one a first-generation American, Italian, and the other, my mother, who is British descent and Northern Irish descent. So I didn't grow up in an Italian household, Karen, at all. And my Italian cousin Penny will tell you I make the best Irish lasagna she's ever tasted.
Irish lasagna. Wow.
Yes, I can't cook Italian food, according to my cousin Penny.
Well, we have a little bit in common because my mother-in-law was Irish and Scottish descent. And it's funny because she never would really admit to it. And we one day asked her why. And she said, because I was born in America, so I'm American. And it was like, all right, that's fine. But when we tried to figure out where the whole family was from, it was quite interesting to take that little journey. And it's interesting that you are from upstate New York, but you still have a very English distinct mannerism.
Oh, this has been a long time in the making, if you will. I've lived now, I'm trying to think, what am I? I don't want to tell everyone how old I am, but I'm 42. And I have spent the majority of my life traveling outside of the United States and going to university abroad. And now as I'm an adult living outside of the United States, so when I first came to the United Kingdom as a historian, they said, well, no one's going to take you seriously. Your country doesn't have any history. So how can you be a historian? And then I learned very quickly how the British were. If you want to play, you have to play by their rules and their game. So I said, oh, that's fine. I can do this. Took my elocution classes, didn't need to do anything for my knowledge or education because I was coming to the table with more than what they knew. So with all their fancy degrees and titles and speaking very posh, I said, oh, if that's the game you want to play, well, I'll play. And so here I am.
Here you are. And, and I think it's interesting that remark that they made that we don't have any history. We do have a history. It's a little bit of everything from around the world. And so, maybe we don't have a lot of Native American history, although if we would travel around the United States, we probably could get more information about the Native Americans than we ever thought was possible.
Oh, yes, yes.
So, yes, to those in Great Britain, we do have a history. So, but today we're going to talk about, the history basically around London, where the Queen
Mm.
and her family live. Um, and, maybe you can tell me, but about a year or so ago, I was watching The Crown. I made sure that I watched every episode, and I watched it twice. And sometimes I sat back
Right.
and I thought, can this really be real? Or
Mm.
how much of it is made up? So can you give me a little
Yes.
information there?
I have my own problem with The Crown. Number one, it is produced and written by Republicans, not American Republicans like opposite the Democrats, but Republicans that no longer want a monarchy. So they would favor a republic over a constitutional monarchy. That's what a republican
Okay.
is in everything other than an American sense. So I get really angry because it's fanciful script writing. We never know what members of the royal family say to each other, what their private conversations are. Number one, first and foremost, this is a drama. They're out to make money.
Right.
So they're using the best telenovela they could find in real life, which is not the Kardashians, it's the royal family. So what they've done is they've speeded up the timeline, they've slowed it down when they want to, and they've really over dramatized the actual events that did happen. So they've taken an event and what they've said is, oh, let's dramatize this. Let's just write what we think might have been said or what they were thinking or how they were feeling. And case in point, the first series, when the Welsh mining disaster in Aberfan happened, and they made it seem as if, well, the Queen said, why would they want me to go there? And it made her very aloof and it made her distant from her people. Now, people who know the Queen know she's anything but aloof and distant from her people. What that was, the true history is it was a political minefield. It was all about politics. So if she would have gone in regardless before the prime minister and everyone else, it would have been seen as her actually endorsing one side of the political spectrum. Well, this shouldn't have happened. You should have been on the regulations, health and safety. Not that there was that much health and safety back then, but things should have been in place better than what they were. So she can't just go and throw herself into the politics of the day. Once it was sort of hashed out, if you will, between what was going to happen, then they sent her, go and see the people. Yes, I want to see the people. I want to make sure that they're okay. And they really did a number on Her Majesty to make it as if she didn't want to go to Wales, that she didn't know if they would even want her to be there. She's the monarch, of course they do. And it shows very good that whenever there's been something horrible and disastrous, not only in the United Kingdom, but around the world in the 14 other countries of which she is head of state and queen, she always makes sure to, if not send a letter of condolence, visit when she can. And people see that. But the crown really took that away from her. And the problem is, a lot of people think the crown is the Bible of the truth of the royal family when it's
And,
not.
and I will tell our listeners what I found interesting is that I watched it and then I started researching. And I have a son who is very into history. And
Perfect.
so he would be watching it as well, obviously in another room because mothers and kids, don't want to watch things together. But then he would text me and he'd say, that was not true. This is why.
Exactly.
And so I got even more of an education. So I enjoyed it as a movie, so to speak.
Hmm.
But then I said, okay, I need to know the reality of it. And
Yes.
we all know anything that is going to be produced for money, most likely has to, they have to take liberty with it, so to
Oh,
speak.
and they do. And it has an agenda. And when you look now, thinking in a Republican aspect, and see the innuendos and the things that they do to put out to actually push off that the crown is not like everyday people, that it's there to serve itself when it's not. The crown is there because the people allow it to be. So there's a lot that goes into the crown that's actually not pro-monarchy at all. And it's funny you say about your son texting you because I just finished season 1 of Bridgerton. And everyone says, "What do you mean? We're almost on season 3." And I said, "But I'm a historian first and foremost, and when things don't follow the history, I have a problem. I've already broken 2 televisions showing the remote control because I got so angry, and that gets a bit costly after a while. So one of my friends said to me, you know, Thomas, look, if you take all of the history out of it, take everything you know, everything you've trained for, everything you've studied, and throw it out the window and watch it for ferocious sex scenes and dubious plots and anything that makes a wonderful Saturday evening with a glass of wine, you'll enjoy it. So I said, all right, let's think about this. So I settled in, and my friend Valerie and I were just on the settee, and all of a sudden I was like, all right, that wouldn't happen. This court is not right. There weren't people of color like that in the court. And look at the, and she said, look, if you're going to start, I'm going downstairs. I'm not watching this with you. She said, light-hearted and fun, don't be a professional. So I just have to remember, I have a couple glasses of wine before I watch it and sit down, and it's rather enjoyable.
Absolutely. So when you were growing up in the Lake George area, and as I said, I'm very familiar with it because I have family in Saratoga Springs, which is just
Wonderful. Run the
up and down the road
horses.
there.
Yes.
Oh yes, the horse racing is magnificent.
Yes.
But when you were growing up there, was it the influence of your mother that made you want to know more and know the truth about the English people?
Well, it was more my family, my grandmother as well, my nana. See, my grandmother was wed in the year that Her Majesty became queen. Well, was
Okay.
crowned queen, 1953. And my grandmother was always interested in the queen and her jewels and her dresses. My grandmother was a fashionista, and she always loved to look her best, of course, for my grandfather and her family. She took very great pride in looking her best, dressing her best, wearing her best jewels. And she would always say, now I have quite a nice collection, but the Queen's got a fantastic collection. And every time the Queen would be on the television, or something had come out in a magazine, or she'd send away for something, because my grandmother was the queen of sending away for everything. I think she kept QVC in business for the longest time. But it was just, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents when I was little. So what I really learned, even the customs of tea and these sorts of things, when you come home, the first thing, you want a cuppa? Yes, please. Afternoon tea with my grandmother. It's just the way we were as a family. My mother learned that. She likes her tea. We're tea drinkers. So it made me, I think what happened was, in my 4th grade class in primary school, we were learning about Fort William Henry and Fort Ticonderoga and the British and the King. And I've always had a fascination with castles. And anyone who knows me knows that in one of my former lives, I probably was the lowest of the low, stable person, and just daydreamed about living in the palace when I knew I never would. And it's just stuck with me through my various lives. But I wanted to know, where are we from? If this is the faraway land and the king, and he was so bad to the Americans that they had to break free, and something doesn't reverberate well with me here. So I was learning the history of my town. I was learning the history of the lake, learning just history. And then my grandmother says, well, you know, my family, the Archers, the Burgesses, the Rosses, we're all English and British, and your grandfather's family are all Northern Irish. And so, really? So what's our story? And that's how it came to be. And growing up in that area that is so rich in British history, and a family, my mother's family, British, and just reclaiming that side of who we are and doing our DNA, learning where we've come from. 23andMe was fantastic. So even though my father is a 1st-generation Italian American, my DNA shows I'm a lot more British than I am Italian, which I find very interesting. So my brother did his, my mother did hers, and you would think 2 siblings from the same parents would have very similar DNA.
Right.
Well, my brother is a lot more Italian in his blood than I am. And when you look at the dynamic of my family, it's always been my mother and myself and my brother and my father. And they always say you gravitate more towards the parent you're most like. Well, we broke it down and the DNA shows I'm more like my mother and my brother's more like my father. So,
How interesting is that?
yeah,
Um,
very interesting. If you haven't done
yes.
your DNA, really do it. There could be some skeletons that you'll find, but it's better to know rather than have it just creep out later.
Well, I had a close relationship with my grandparents on both sides, but
Mm.
I wasn't an inquisitive young child. So I didn't ask a lot of questions about, you know, where were you born? Where did you grow up? What about your
Ah.
parents? Um, I do remember that my mother's parents, I knew I knew ever since I was very, very little that they had come from Russia. And now I understand the part of Russia they came from is now the Ukraine. Um,
Oh, yes.
so that has become I become more obsessive to learning more about that. But
Hmm.
um, my grandparents didn't talk a lot about, their younger years,
Hmm.
but my grandmother smuggled out a little bag of rubles and she
Oh,
kept them in her dresser. And when her grandchildren came over, we always went to that dresser drawer and we looked at them as something so
mm,
amazing, like it was gold. Um, and I have no idea whatever happened to them after my
oh,
grandparents passed away, but that was my connection of knowing
hmm,
where they were from. And then most
right.
recently, I started doing more research. And so I love what you have done in your life because knowing where we come from helps us know
Mm.
ourselves better.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you. And there was just always something when I was young. I always felt that even though it's a pretty area and the lake and the mountains and it's gorgeous, for me, I always said, but there's something more for me. I'm not a small town person. I like it. I wouldn't mind taking a few weeks holiday or vacation to the mountains, but
Right.
I'm someone who needs to have more. I need culture. I need capitals of Europe within an hour to a 2 hour flight of me. I need languages. I need all of that. And we were so blessed living literally within just not even a few hours drive to Montreal.
Right.
And my parents and my grandparents, that's what we did from when we were young children. We were always to Montreal. And living so close to the border and my family owning restaurants and facilities where we'd have a lot of French Canadians come down, we had to speak French. And we didn't have electives for language in our school. We only had French until maybe um, just a few years before I graduated. But it was very much conditioned that where we live, we depend on summer traffic. Of course, we would depend on city people coming, but we depended mostly in year round on the
Right.
Canadians and especially the French Canadians. So language has always been in my family. And that's just me, just learning about my family and where we came from opened the door to travel. And I've traveled since I was so young. And the one thing I blame my mother for is my horrible addiction to not only travel, but to theatre and the arts and language because I can't get enough. And I'm so spoiled living in London because every weekend you leave on a Thursday, come back on a Sunday. Hour and a half, you're in Italy. An hour, you're in the Netherlands. You're in France. You're in Portugal. You're everywhere. And it just so happens to be that a lot of these countries used to be monarchies or still are. So it feeds my royal interest as well.
I love it. So explain to our listeners who maybe don't follow the news. And sadly, I think we have a generation of very young people who um, the news is not that important to them right now. It's
Ah,
getting by day. But
mhm.
there's a lot going on with the Queen and um, everything in London. So, what is this all about?
This is this touches everybody, whether you're young, you're middle aged, you're old. 70 years this woman has been head of state. 70 years this woman has been the steadfast continuity, just bedrock of the British people, the life's blood, the ambassador for this country. No matter if you're young or you're old, someone who is dedicated to public service like that, you need to take it.
Wow.
You need to take note and pay attention, because they don't make people like that anymore. And when people say to me, Thomas, why is it that you like that system? A king and a queen, it's just so old fashioned. I say, is it? Is it so old fashioned that there's something above politics that unites the people rather than to have nothing that pulls everybody apart? I said, I've been fortunate. I grew up in a republic. I was born in a republic. I live in a monarchy. And I can honestly, hands down, say that when the government of the day is actually held to account to something tangible, to one person who is not politically aligned and does not belong to any party, but is there as a representative of the people, so much so that the monarch actually says to the head of state, you're coming to my office every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, and we're going to talk about the state of this country. You have a government in my name. Well, that's my name that you're playing with. So let's talk about it. And when you have somebody that has taken the remnants of the British Empire when it fell apart when she came to the throne, taking 7 regions and building it into 54 independent nations, known as the Commonwealth of Nations, 15 of those countries of which she is the queen and head of state. No one else can go to the United Nations in New York and stand in front of 15 flags and say, all of these people in all of these countries, I speak for them. I'm their queen, I'm their head of state. So regardless, if you take the queen as a person out of it and you look at the context of just the actual crown itself, it is there to serve the people. The people don't serve it. It is there to make sure that the people are protected from overzealous politicians that wish to usurp the power the crown has for themselves. And Karen, I always say, the crown shouldn't be known for the power it has, but the power it denies others who would want to use it for their own gain rather than for the betterment of the people. And that's how I can see that the constitutional monarchy aspect far outweighs what we have in America, because you live there, you see it, and I see it from afar. America is polarized, and the politics are tearing at the fabric every day. And I do worry, and it does make me sad, because America is my country, but the United Kingdom is my home. And no matter how long I don't live in America, I'll always be from America. And to see what's happening to the country actually breaks my heart, because there's nothing above politics. It is the politician who is there. I'm going to be a president for everyone. Well, how many presidents say that? And then one party says, well, you're in power, we don't like you. But then they get into power and the other party says, well, we don't like you. So we don't have that problem.
I understand.
Yeah.
So it's my understanding from the research I've done that Queen Elizabeth really did not want the position to be the queen, but her uncle obviously couldn't take it because of his relationship, which since then so much has changed. I wonder what, how that would be today. But here is a very young woman, a young
25.
bride,
Yes.
she now becomes, the head of all these countries. And she still has people who aren't trusting her because she's this young girl who really wanted to have a life with horses.
That's what she wanted. She wanted a country life with her husband, her children. But the thing is, when you want to talk about empowerment, let's break this down to young people, Karen, and let's look at influencers. Let's look at Instagram and all of these people. Oh, well, I'm an influencer. Really? That's your job? Fine. If you want to call yourself an influencer, the Queen is the original influencer. To hold countries together the way she has, when she speaks, people listen, because out of those 54 countries, that's 2.64 billion people in the world. that she's talking to. And when America was rife in the middle of, well, the beginning of the 60s to the middle of the 60s
Right.
with Jim Crow and the racism and everything that was happening there, here's the Queen dancing with the president of Ghana in Africa. So this woman, she transcends color, she transcends sexism, she transcends everything. She is the original girl power movement, because when she came to the throne, people were like, oh, it's a young queen. She doesn't know much. Even Winston Churchill said, well, I need to stay on in my role just to make sure that, our young queen knows. And she had one of the best teachers, not her father, her mother. And that's the thing, because even though her father was king, he was very poorly, even when he was a child. And it was the Queen Mother who was the power behind the throne and the
Right.
power behind the crown. And she wore the trousers in that family. So for as much as the king said, yes, us four, it was the Queen Mother who shaped up and shipped out when things needed to be done. And so much so that Hitler called her the most dangerous woman in Europe during the Second World War. So
Oof.
this woman is extraordinary. This woman is the greatest statesman we've ever seen on the face of this earth right now. She's the only living and serving head of state who has actually served in World War II. She is the longest reigning, the longest lived sovereign in British history, and she is now the number 2 longest lived monarch in world history. Another
Wow.
2 years, and she beats Louis XIV to be the longest reigning monarch in the history of the world ever.
How
So that's
amazing.
extraordinary. So if we're not paying attention to a tenure of this woman who has 70 years of her profession under her belt with no retirement in sight, works every day at 96 years old, but has 96 years of life under her as well, young people have to be paying attention, because this is something that we're not ever going to see again. And what we're going
Absolutely.
to celebrate this coming weekend, Karen, has been 1,000 years in the making. This country that's always had a precedent set for it is now in uncharted territory, because there's no precedent for a Platinum Jubilee. None at all. And that freaks the British out. What, no precedent?
So over the years, you've written a number of books.
Yes, yes.
So many people would say, well, if Netflix, took liberties, and of course, the magazines at the newsstands are always taking liberty.
Mm.
Did Thomas take liberty when he wrote his books?
No, because Thomas's liberties are with the pouring of spirits rather than they are distorting history.
Okay.
So I am I'm the only royal historian that was allowed to actually write about the drinking habits of Her Majesty in book form and her family. So during 2012, for the Diamond Jubilee, I kept the palace completely abreast of each chapter, what was going in it, because we wouldn't want to make the royal family look like alcoholics. And I didn't want to make myself look like alcoholic. But what we do with this book is we learn the royal roots of each one of the spirits, such as gin, where it came from. It was brought by William and Mary of Orange when they actually came to be joint sovereigns of the United Kingdom during the Glorious Revolution. So at that time, we had Catholic countries and Protestant countries, and spirits would be imported and exported as any commodity would. But spirits were also used as a political sort of commodity as well. So wait a minute, we're having an issue with France, so we're not importing Catholic spirits. No, we'll make our own. So we learn about all of that for each one of the spirits that are, and when I say spirit, the alcohol, gin, brandy, cognac, all of that. So what we do with those books is we make the history fun. We've geared it towards adults who might not have paid attention in history class, but we've also taken a very niche bit of history and have related it to every day. So we learn about the spirits, we know which royals like the spirits, what they drink, but we've actually taken it even further, and we've added fun facts, quotes. One of my friends is actually one of the executive chefs for Her Majesty, and he was the executive chef at Sandhurst, British Military Academy. So he said, Thomas, I'd love to put some of my royal recipes in your book. How would that be? Well, that's great, Rob. Thank you so much. So my book, well, my latest book, Their Majesty's Mixers, When They Rain, They Pour, is absolutely fantastic for a party, a royal party, because you can make royal cocktails, you can have royal recipes from a royal chef that the royals eat, and you can learn all fun facts as to the history of spirits, where they've come from, even, let's just case in point, gin. It pulled the royal family apart. George III didn't want to have the gin, but his son said, well, if you don't like gin, I like gin. And if
Okay.
you don't like this, well, I like this. Because George III and his son were known to go head to head all the time. So when King George and Queen Charlotte were trying to actually say, no, this is mother's ruin, we need more laws, we need abolition, close the gin palaces. Well, their son, the heir to the throne, the Prince of Wales, would go and hang out in a gin palace and say, no, my father wants to do away with all this. Support me. Don't you like me? I'll keep the gin flowing. So all of these things are very much well documented in history, but you need to know where to go to find it because it's just not out there and readily available. And that's what I loved. I was able to go and take all of this information and collate it and put it in a free flowing, and I use that loosely, free flowing way to just bring interest about the royals, about the politics of the day, how they use spirits, and also letting us just play around and drink them while we're reading it. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned something at the beginning about tea time with your grandmother.
Yes.
And one of the
Yes.
things that I'm noticing, at least in our area here of Northeast Ohio, we have a lot of tea rooms starting to open up.
Oh.
I remember as a young child, I grew up in Michigan, and there was a tea room downstairs of the apartment where my grandparents lived. And my grandmother, at least once or twice a year, would make a date with me. My parents would drop me off, and I had to be dressed up, and I had to cross my ankles and the whole bit. But it was just a beautiful ceremony
Mhm.
to speak of. And my grandmother didn't come from any grandiose family, okay,
Mhm.
but she wanted to share something that would be very special with me. And
Mhm.
for a long time, I had really forgotten about it,
Oh.
up until I saw a second tea house opening up here in the area. And it was like, gosh, I think the last time I was at one, I was like 7 years old. Um, and so now I'm curious. I wish I had a little
Mhm.
girl to go with. I can't picture my sons being interested in doing that with me, but I may just have to find a neighbor child that wants to. But what is the essence of tea time? Is it a meal, or is it
Tea. Tea was a holdover between supper and dinner. That's what it was. And tea was actually created by one of the duchesses as something, well, I can't really have formal entertaining now because we've already done that for the luncheon and it's too late for this, but it's too early for supper. So, oh, what am I going to do? So it just became customary that if you wanted people around in the latter part of the afternoon, well, tea was very popular. It was relaxing. It was social. And then people say, oh, just a little nibble to tide me over. Okay, so then you just had some little nibbles, maybe a sweet or a pudding, or then the scones came, and then the sandwiches came, and then before you know it, you have a British tradition that's been here for centuries. And the tea is, well, when you look at what was imported and where it was imported from, and tea was actually brought by one Catherine of Braganza, actually, and she introduced tea to the English court because she brought it with her when she married the king. So it really has royal roots as well, like so much that we've already discussed, Karen. And when you look at even to the crockery, see, it was always milk first or after. That was always the biggest debate with taking or tea. Do you milk first or you tea first? And then it was, do you jam first or do you cream first with your scone? But it used to be a very class-based thing. And I'll tell you why. Because crockery back then, when fine bone china was first coming out, it was unreliable. They didn't fire it right. And only the very upper crust could afford fine bone china. So to temper the crockery, before you put the hot boiling water in there for the tea, you needed to temper the cup, the crockery. So they would milk first, so it wouldn't crack their crockery, because
Interesting.
most people were not affluent. They didn't have money. They couldn't just keep replacing broken mugs
Sure.
in their crockery. So the way to do that was to put the milk in first, and then you were good to go. But then once you were able to have your fine bone china and all of that, it became a class thing. I don't have to temper my cups because I don't have your crockery. I have fine bone china and porcelain. I can just put my tea in and I'll milk after. So you can always tell a little bit still in England based on how people take their tea. If they milk first, a lot of times they come from a family that learned that because they didn't come from well-off roots. And then you can also tell, especially with old money and aristocracy, they're the ones that don't put milk in first, they milk after.
I
So,
love it. How
yeah.
interesting. Well,
So
you
it all came down to crockery.
Yep, I love it. So you have a video coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, but
No,
it's not
2
a
days.
Kim Kardashian video or a Paris Hilton video. Let's
Okay.
make
Well, I'm
sure
glad to
that
hear that.
no one has that sort of idea. It's not a Bridgerton-like video at all. No, I'm joking.
So what
We
is the
have
concept behind this video?
this video, Karen, it is so important, and it is the visual representation of the actual Jubilee Anthem that I was the project visionary of the song that I wrote with one of my dear friends, Anton Vandermeer, who is a very well-known South African opera singer. But he is a producer as well, and he lives here in the United Kingdom. So my organization, the British Monarchists Society, I said, we need to do something. No one's doing anything musical at this point. And this was 2 years ago during lockdown. And that's in this country, we couldn't get together. We were completely isolated. So thank God for Zoom. And thank God Zoom went ahead and abandoned their 40-minute time
Right,
limit.
exactly.
So he said to me, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do a song for the Queen. Let's see what we can do. I've got pages and pages and pages of notes and history, and I'm just having a hell of a time. How do I put 70 years of a reign and 96 years of a life into 4 minutes of song? And then the cheeky sod, he says, well, Taylor Swift just put out an 11-minute and 30-second song. I said, but I'm not Taylor Swift. So it wouldn't work right. So we worked and we worked and we worked. I mean, hundreds of man hours from the research, from just writing and discussion. And we came up with a song called Thank You from Our Hearts. And what it is it's a look at each one of Her Majesty's realms and Commonwealth countries through music. And we take, case in point, Africa, because the Queen was actually, well, she became Queen in Africa
Right.
when she was there. Her father died at Sandringham and she was in Africa, and she's our African Queen. So we started in Africa. So we have Swahili chanting, we have different instruments. Then we move to Eurasia and Australasia, and we've got the didgeridoo, we've got Hindi chanting, we've got Maori singers as well as that. So we circumnavigate the world in a musical tribute to 70 years of Her Majesty and the service she's given to the people of this world. And I sat there and I said, yeah, this is great. Something's missing. I said, this is all world showcase, and we only kind of throw in the bagpipes towards the end to represent the United Kingdom. But really, the world story as we know it today with the Commonwealth and everything started here. Everything branched out from here and went around. I said, picked up the phone to Dr. Olga Thomas, who is a very good friend of mine and a patron of my organization, but she just happens to be the private composer to Her Majesty and the royal family. And I said, Olga, Dr. Thomas, I said, I'm having something happen in my brain, and you're going to probably kill me when it's all said and done, but I need an introduction to a world showcase. I need something that's going to transcend the four British nations of England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales. I said, help me. So she goes, right, you outline it and I'll get to work. So a couple days went by and we brainstormed and she got everything and I put it exactly the way it needed to be. And she came back to me. And she's a night owl like I am, right? So vampires, the two of us, 2, 3 in the morning. So it's nothing for her to ring me up at 2:15. So the phone goes and I said, that's either one of two people, Mervyn or Olga. And she'll say, Thomas, because she has this lovely Russian accent because she's originally from Russia. And she'll say, no, Thomas, I've done it. And she has such a fantastic way of hearing an orchestra in her head, but no one else can. And she's a pianist that is just phenomenal talent. So she goes, I put you on speaker. And she puts me down and then bangs away on the piano. My eardrums are doing this sort of thing. And then, what do you think? I'm like, right, give me 20 minutes, put down the phone. And I think about it. And what she's able to create, I couldn't believe it. So months we worked on this and we called it the Four British Nations. So then it was just a classical piece, all instrumental. Robert Emery produced it with his orchestra. He does all of the Crown copyright, the Queen's Massed Bands, all of that sort of stuff. And I said, no. I love it. You're fantastic, but there's something missing. I see the four British nations, but I don't see the Queen in this. I see the guards, the slow march going to a quick march. Where's the chanting? Where's the exaltation? Where is Westminster Abbey in 1953? I said, Olga, I have fantastic talent that's appearing on We Thank You From Our Hearts. Leslie Garrett, CBE. She's the UK's #1 most well-known soprano, had her own BBC show for years. Patron friend of mine, Rodney Earl Clark, he stars right now in the West End's Les Mis, but he was the first Black British opera singer to sing the national anthem at Twickenham. For the
Wow.
rugby, which was fantastic. But now we have Britain's Got Talent here, like you have America's Got Talent.
Right.
Well, the renowned international London Community Gospel Choir, they're finalists now on Britain's Got Talent, but very well known before this. And they're also on my track. And I said, you know what, Olga, I'm going to arrange the Latin. I want Vivat Regina Elisabetta, which is, long live Queen Elizabeth. And let's do this. So it got to the point where it just all came together. Shivers from the four British nations into We Thank You From Our Hearts, just the reverberations of the music, of the actual Latin, and it brings you right back to 1953, but in a modern context. And what we've created, Karen, is just a musical tribute unlike any other, because the Queen is unlike any other, and it's fitting, it's full of symbolism. The lyrics, when we go into the first chorus, we talk about the Queen's unblemished face, and then the second chorus is the Queen's maturing face. So as we progress with the song, we progress with her reign, but we see it in her face. It's about evolution of 70 years. So it's not just a pretty song. When you actually listen to the meaning of those lyrics in that song, you actually come away when it's over and you just sit there and you look at the screen and you're like, I don't know whether to get out the history book or grab a Kleenex, or I don't really know what to do right now because it really is that touching. So this video that comes out on Thursday, which is the Queen's official birthday, it's for her. All of this has been for her. And that is the official music video. Now, we released this on the eve of her real birthday. Her birthday is the 21st of April. Mine's August, hers is April. And we released this on the 20th. Well, on her birthday, the 21st of April, the song debuted at #1 but we have two parts. So it debuted at #1 and #2 on the iTunes classical chart and number 27 on the overall top 100.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
I'm so thrilled. I have a #1 hit to my name, and I don't write music, and you certainly don't want me to sing music. But just being able to get the caliber of people involved, and it took us 2 years to write and record and practice, and having the lockdown did not help us. So when we were able to ease up the restrictions and we could get together, we were to the studio quicker than anything. And a whole weekend of recording, not just the 4 British nations, but we thank you from our hearts, and having to have the chanters, the Swahili people, and then the Maori man is just fantastic when you listen to what he says. And all of the verses, even though it's a different language, has very real meaning, because in that language it's, praise the queen, thank the queen, keoha de queenie, all bow down, and these sorts of things. So when we give reference to the global crown, because the crown is predominantly of the world, and the queen is not just the queen of the UK. There's Americans that love her, that have
Absolutely.
watched her, that actually aspire to be what she has been in a public sense, in public office. And I think a lot of politicians around the world can and do learn from her example. And in politics, when you have aspired to be the leader of your country, you've made it when the Queen invites you for a state visit and you're dining at her table. You've made it on the political stage internationally when you're accepting an invitation to Buckingham Palace.
Well, you have shared so much knowledge with us, but in a very entertaining way. And I appreciate that, because there are so many people, like I was when I was younger. History just felt very dry. But when you have somebody who shares history with you in a relaxed manner, okay, not
Mhm.
pushing it down your throat. You've got to remember this date. You have to remember this
No.
fact. But when I hear it like this, it's like, well, she's a member of my family. I now know the English people a little bit better. How wonderful. And I think you are living your dream,
I am.
doing what you love to do. We're going to have all this information in the show notes. So for those of you who are listening, if you said, I missed it, where did you say I can get the books? We're going to put all those things in the show notes, because
Great.
I think so many of us want a little bit more, and we're just running out of time.
Oh, it's too bad. I really wish that we had more time, because there's so much more to tell everybody. And Karen, if we had literally another 3 hours, we wouldn't even scratch the surface of what I would love to share with your listeners.
Well, I'm going to have you back again, and we're going to have to plan it, what we really want to talk about, so we can make people understand that, as an American, so many of us look at the monarchy and we do scratch our head. Why?
Yes.
Why is there a monarchy? But you've explained.
We got rid of it.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. We got
Right.
rid of it. And I said, but you're so curious that you spend millions and millions and millions every year to come to the United Kingdom to see
Absolutely.
what we have. Yeah, case in point, I was on Princess Cruise Lines in March, and I had taken a transatlantic repositioning from Fort Lauderdale to Southampton, 16 days. And I made up part of their enrichment lecture series and gave a few speeches about the crown in America, what it means. And I filled that theater. 3/4 of the people were Americans on that ship. And if they talked to me once after that, they came up to me during dinner, after the shows. Can I ask a question? So the interest is there, Karen. Americans
Absolutely.
really, even the men, and some of them, these older men, oh, that's my wife's thing. Oh, no, no.
No,
They were interested. Now,
absolutely.
you did say something about Charles and Camilla, and I just wanted to know. I said, that's fine. Let's go have a pint down in the pub and we'll discuss it. And I did. So the interest is there, Karen. So regardless where people are from in America, there's always some sort of affinity and interest or question that even the most ardent Republican will ask.
I love it. Well, again, I will arrange to have you back on. We can keep this
Great.
discussion going because I'll tell you, um, I still have a lot more living to do, and I want to know more about, where my mother-in-law came from and so much more. So
Oh, that's
thank
great.
you, Thomas Mace-Archr-Mills. It may be a mouthful, but it was worth the last 45 minutes. Have a great day. Bye-bye
Thank you
now.
so much, Karen. Bye.
Bye.